yeah, my mom took my sister and I to the performance, and I completely fell in love with dance halfway through the show. I remember, just being in awe of it. And in the interval, I asked my mother if I could learn how to dance.
Hi, I'm Zack Newmark, and this is Damn Yankee. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts for all the best interviews with the most talented people based here in the Netherlands and those traveling through the country. Originally from the States, Constantine Allen has traveled the world as a ballet dancer. He danced as a principal dancer with the Stuttgart Ballet, and since 2018, he has been a principal dancer with the Dutch National Ballet, where he continues to enchant audiences with his artistry and skill. And if you're lucky, you'll get to see him on stage here or anywhere where he's touring around. Constantine, or Costa, thank you so much for joining us. It's really nice to have you here today.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So you go by Costa,
yes.
like more with your...
friends and family call me Costa. New friends call me Costa, but my birth name is Constantine and stage name.
Yeah. So what is it that actually brought you out to Amsterdam in the first place? I mean, you certainly would have had opportunities at a number of different places to perform. You've been working in ballet or studying ballet for quite some time, really your whole life. So what is it about this ballet company that made it so interesting for you to come out here?
A few things. I was a freelance principal dancer at the time. I had been with Stuttgart Ballet for 5 years, and I had reached a point professionally in my career where luckily I had the opportunity to explore elsewhere. So I took a sabbatical, I guess you could say, and I guested with a few companies around the world. And Dutch National Ballet had a few appeals to me. They've always been a part of the conversation in pushing the art form further into the future, but also have had a really nice understanding of their tradition and other traditions within our world. And also personally, I lived in Stuttgart for many years, and the Netherlands, The Hague, Amsterdam was somewhere I traveled frequently, and I have family friends that live in The Hague that I've known for decades at this point. So it was a few things put together.
Yeah. And I mean, now you've stayed.
Yes.
It wasn't, it might have been a sort of short-term thing at one point, but now it's going on 7 or 8 years at this point.
Yeah, I really enjoy working in the theater here. There's sort of the same format in every company that you work in, but there are of course, notable differences in terms of sometimes the approach or sometimes the repertoire. And I just really enjoyed the approach and the attention to a different kind of detail that they have here.
Can you expand on that a little bit further? What's kind of, what's different about the approach here than in either other places that you work or other companies that you know?
Well, something I've noticed about the Dutch National Ballet is, of course, the technical level is very high, and artistry as well. We're telling interesting stories. But for me, the first thing that stood out was the notoriety of the company. Where I was dancing before with Stuttgart Ballet is a very world-renowned company, but sort of not, I guess, closed off is too strong of a phrase, but just very protective of their repertoire and what they produce publicly outside of Stuttgart. And so it was just all of a sudden, I really felt like I was on a world stage where critics were coming regularly to shows, and it just sort of upped the game for me.
Well, how do you personally react to that? With more interest, more more publicity, more critics, more people paying attention in general?
It's developed over the years. I think it's sort of all under the umbrella of being an artist and getting older. My nerves have changed in my nerves have sort of changed in ways that I'm thinking about very much the live moment, and I guess critics and notoriety have sort of that faded away maybe a couple years ago after I sort of got used to it. And now sort of my thoughts are about everything that can go wrong in the moment, and not so much thinking about how that's received by a critic or by a spectator, but just sort of, dealing with my own nerves and confusion of performing. Yeah.
Does that is this something that happens to you when you're on stage, or is this something that happens just up to the moment that the curtain raises?
In terms of,
Dealing with your own nerves and maybe thinking a little bit more about what may or may not go wrong when you're actually out there.
it's, I'd say it's all of it. Well, everyone deals with these things differently, but the older I'm getting, the more nervous I'm getting. It's you understand everything that can go wrong, and so it's, of course, you have moments where you feel physically great. Your muscles aren't sore, you have good energy, and so you're sort of able to focus on that. And these are the days that you're not thinking as much. But no, for me, it's leading up to the moment. I can sort of let that go when the performance starts. But if something's coming up that I have anticipated before, I start thinking about it, and it changes. And then there's that odd moment where you truly have an outer body experience and you don't remember any of it. And so it's just it's not a balance at all.
Is it, ballet is a different art form in, compared to other art forms in so many ways, in that I think, at least as someone on the outside of it, it feels like there's just so much more grinding towards perfection, and that anything even slightly below perfection is just, inexcusable, is kind of maybe the public impression.
I mean, that is an accurate impression of our world, for sure. It's, I mean, we're all striving for perfection. Of course, the idea of perfection is evolving in today's conversations, socially, and, of the current events of today.
When you say today's conversations, you mean a little bit more towards
The
like
idea
worker
of,
safety and welfare in that way, or
well, I guess just
protection of the artists themselves?
that, and also just the idea of perfection, the commercial standards of beauty, or these sort of conversations, and so inclusivity. It's an interesting conversation to have, because it's really what we're striving for. Is this very cohesive look where everyone sort of fits into a particular box, but then at the same time we're trying to have this conversation of inclusivity, and how can we break through that box while remaining true to the tradition and the discipline, because most of us spend from age 4 or 5 until we're 18, 19, looking in a mirror and trying to find every single thing that's wrong and or incorrect, and in terms of technique and the aesthetic. And sometimes that is also just accepting your capabilities as a human and what you've been given by God or whoever. And so there's a lot being processed during our training, and that only continues into the professional world, because it's everything that we've learned but over the years, but it just sort of becomes heightened because there's a time sensitivity with our career on top of everything. So you're reaching perfection, but you only have a certain amount of time to do that, because once physical capabilities start to fall, then it's really about reaching perfection in other ways in your artistry and how you perform. And so it just is constantly evolving.
Because you're now, I think, 31
Yes.
years old. So what is the sort of typical lifespan of a lead ballet dancer?
I'd say the average age for a male dancer, whether you're in the corps de ballet or whether you're at my rank as a principal, I'd say the average age of retirement is usually from 35 to 40.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, the boys usually it's our knees and our backs that go out. And the girls have, I guess the girls seemingly have a longer lifespan, and they're usually, I'd say the average age of retirement for women is, probably just over 35 to 42 usually. And it's most of the time it's their feet and their hips, or, that's what's usually going for the girls. And it just depends on your willingness, your physical capability. It's a tough job. It really is. You're an extreme athlete. Yeah.
How do you sort of balance that kind of, constant pushing yourself towards perfection, maybe nagging yourself, or, little bits of self-doubt, or, these sort of elements kind of creep in at the same time, you're also trying to push, weigh on, something else that's weighing on your mind is maybe what could go wrong in the middle of a performance, like you were saying, and you have, what you think is maybe 5 to 10 years more in a professional career in this. So how do you actually, manage to balance that?
I think it's something that I try and access in moments of having all these thoughts is just sort of relying on the training that I've had. I guess I've been professionally training since I was 12 years old, 13 actually. And, but up until that point, from age 5 until 13, it was a very intense hobby for me. And there have been different stages where I've learned a lot, so I try and trust these things. If my body isn't feeling as good as I would hope before a performance, I try and rely on the muscle memory of things, that it's all going to be okay, because I've been doing this since I was a kid. And and then I think about, the book The Outliers, 10,000 hours, and I'm like, okay, you definitely passed that, but you haven't reached perfection yet, and it's just sort of a balancing act.
Is it kind of tough on you also as a child, because you said that you were, even before you were at a professional training, you were still working really intensively. You were born in Indiana, but moved to Hawaii at an early age. We found an article about you from the Honolulu Advertiser.
Oh, that's wild.
From I think when you were about 12 years old. And what the producer of this episode, Peach, and I noticed when we were going through it was that there was a section about what your favorite things are. And if you looked at, your favorite foods, for example, it was not what maybe my 13-year-old would say is her favorite foods, or my 10-year-old would say. They'd be all about, candy or pizza or burgers, and your favorite foods listed were like types of vegetables.
Oh, really?
And things like that. And so it's really it's quite a different it's quite a different way of growing up from other kids who maybe are still sort of looking around for their passions, or who have different passions than training what is ultimately to become a top athlete.
Yeah, I have to admit that might be some embroidery from the journalist. But no, I've been lucky with my parents as well. They've always been, I wouldn't even say encouraged. They've always just presented healthy food to us. But yeah, it was something that, you have to be conscious of when you are going through this vigorous of training as a kid, and I've been really lucky because I found dance in a very, I guess you could say it was a sort of kismet situation, and sort of the training and everything that has come along with it has never really been a question for me. It's I was thinking about it on my way here and it's sort of inexplicable in a way. There's just all the decisions that I've made have almost fallen into my lap, but also the decisions that I've taken have also just been very clear in how I've searched for them. And so it's just sort of never been a question, taking care of your body, sacrificing certain things. It's not a normal childhood when you leave academic school and you go straight to the studio and you're there from, 3 o'clock until 9 in the evening. And, it's, of course, there are kids, doing that with sports and other extracurricular activities, but even that is uncommon.
Mm. And your parents weren't sort of pushing you towards this, or kind of pushing you to
Not
be at the highest level that you could be? What was that family life like?
My mother's a surgeon, so she's definitely she's a woman of science that believes in effort and trying your best. It's also the Indian side of my family. I'm half Indian and half Greek, and so it's a very tough approach to doing your best. But my mother, having grown up in America, she's has that very American attitude attitude towards it, where it's just sort of like, do your best. There's no fuss. Let's just all do our best. And my dad is the very artistic one, where his approach to things have sort of been, let's see how far we can take this. Let's see how far you can go. And, if you love it, then you're going to go very far.
You wouldn't say your mom was that sort of, there's a stereotype of Indian mothers with, kind of helicoptering and pushing and pushing and pushing. I have some friends who kind of, lived through that stereotype as well when I was growing up. Was that kind of, that sort of push and drive, was that a little bit more from your mom than from your dad? Or was it really both of them were sort of, you're very talented. Let's see what happens next?
My parents have gone through phases where they've been excited by understanding more of where this career could take me. But I'd say generally they've both just been really supportive, and my mother, saying, I've said she was a surgeon, she was working from 7 until 6 in the evening or later on surgery days. And, my father really was, taking care of the kids. I have 3 other siblings. I'm one of 4. And so I felt there were moments where I felt, fully supported by my father and supported by my mother from a distance. And then during the summer, my mom was, had more time to be the one taking me to dance. And, my dad was able to, sort of take a break. And we just went through phases where, one was around more than the other. But in terms of pushing me to strive for greatness, if remembering it now, it feels more just like my parents were fully supporting me, and that support is just more motivation than you can imagine. I wish all kids to have the parents that I had growing up.
Are your parents actually from Indiana?
No, my mother's from India. She moved to the States in 1969, and my dad is second generation, and his family's from Greece. And so my dad grew up in Gary, Indiana.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So just an hour away from where I'm from.
Yeah. So you know the area well. Yeah. And so my dad grew up in Gary, and my mom grew up in Bedford. But they moved in '69. They moved to Kentucky, and my grandfather was a general surgeon, and so they bounced around until they found Bedford.
All right. So how long did your dad actually stay in Gary? I mean, I don't have very, fond memories of Gary.
Oh, my dad was, I mean, yeah,
It's not the, it's been a rough place for a long time, especially when there were, it was hit hard economically, factory closures, not the loveliest of smells from those factories when they were running, when, if we were driving through and going to Michigan or something like that. Also where Michael Jackson's from.
Yes.
As well. And so, what are your father's memories of Gary, and how quickly did he leave?
My father speaks about Gary in a very nostalgic way because, my dad was probably in Gary until the time he went to university, so 18. And I'm not exactly sure how long my grandparents stayed in Gary, but I think they Yeah, from my understanding, they never left until my grandfather remarried after my grandmother had passed. But no, my dad speaks about the time in Gary was there was gentrification, and then it, sort of went south, and then there was regentrification, and so he sort of sees Gary in a lot of different light. But it was the murder capital of the world for many years, and my dad's family was actually sort of socially active, like back then, where they there were a lot of, during one of the gentrification times, periods, black family after black family was being pushed out of the community, and my grandmother had my father put on a sweatshirt that she made, and it was turn off the lights, like the last ones out of Gary, and it was just sort of their stance on what was happening to the community, and that they were one of the last white families to continue living there. Because it wasn't, his experience of it was, it was more integrated than people would have imagined. But it was the consequences of that integration was something really extreme to grow up in. So my dad has a social awareness, street awareness that is something he's really tried to pass down to us growing up.
Is that sort of, is that kind of, you said it was passed down to you, is that a sort of open-mindedness and an open-minded attitude to pursuing a career in the arts? Does that also come from that?
I would say that probably comes from my dad's side of the family. They were just very interested in music and arts and, culture. So, and I guess probably that it's maybe a nature versus nurture thing. It was, I guess it's both, because also the town that they were living in, with everything that it was experiencing, that was also an influence for my father's family probably. But it's just, hearing the stories that my dad has from Gary, most of them are quite explicit. Also my grandfather was a concrete worker, so my dad was also working from age 13, 14. So it was a very blue collar sort of.
Oh, it's a very blue collar place. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So it was, a lot. I mean, I could go on for ages about this one, actually. Because it's, for people that don't know much about Gary, it's, so much has happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And of all places, how does your family go from Indiana to Hawaii? Because you were born in Indiana, but just before you turned 1, you moved to Hawaii.
While my mom was doing her residency and her fellowship, my parents, they were dating, but sort of on and off. And my dad had taken a trip to Hawaii that turned into a couple years stay. He just fell in love with Hawaii, and when him and my mom reconnected a few years later, and things got very serious, the future was being planned. They just sort of made the decision that they wanted to move there. They wanted to be somewhere where they didn't have to go anywhere to be on vacation. Yeah. And my mom's a urogynecologist, so she's a specialist. It's a specialty of OBG, YN, and so they needed a specialist there. So in terms of work, it worked out perfectly, and
And how long did you all end up living there?
I lived there until I was 13, until I moved to boarding school. And my parents were right in the middle of rebuilding our house at the time. But then that wonderful crash of 2008 occurred, and the construction time really expanded. It took what was supposed to be maybe a 2-year project turned into a couple years trying to just make it through that time period. Yeah. So my grandparents live in Florida, and my mother, being the eldest child in an Indian family, is taking the responsibility to sort of be closer to my grandfather now, because my grandmother passed a year ago. But
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's life. And so my mother is she's been in DC for almost 15, 16 years now, because boarding school wasn't the best environment for me to be in. And just by chance, my mother found a job at a hospital in the DC area. And so it was a natural progression for our family. And my father and my siblings stayed in Hawaii for another year or another 2 years, while my brothers finished middle school and my sister was sent off to college. And so then the whole family sort of moved after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was in Hawaii itself, that's where you actually kind of fell in love with dancing, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Hawaii is where I discovered dance. One of my mother's patients gave her 3 tickets to see Cats the Musical. And my mother's intention was to take my sister and her best friend. And my sister's best friend fell ill that evening, and my dad had the twins in his arms and was like, "Take Costa, I've already got the twins," And yeah, my mom took my sister and I to the performance, and I completely fell in love with dance halfway through the show. I remember, just being in awe of it, and in the interval, I asked my mother if I could learn how to dance. Yeah.
And your sister had the same affection for it, or not so much?
No, not so much. I mean, she was enrolled in dance with me at the very beginning, but quickly fell out of it. My sister is very active. She's been involved in water polo and kayaking and, a lot of water sports. Outrigger canoeing.
Forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but I think I read your sister may have fallen asleep during that performance of Cats.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Actually, but no, it was something that I was immediately fell in love with, and it was. Don't really know how to describe it. I mean, my parents weren't unsupportive at the beginning, but they were questioning. Also, it's just in terms of balancing out 4 kids and their extracurricular activities. I was playing soccer at the time, and so it was just they were a bit weary about adding another extracurricular, but and so my mom sort of came up with this thing where it was, if I could do the splits, if I could do something that they were doing on stage, that she would enroll me in dance. So 2 weeks, I practiced doing the splits in my room by myself. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just trying to, spread my legs. And I came up to her. I showed her that I had learned how to do the splits, and she was like, "Okay, I'll enroll you." And it was at first at an all-around dance studio, and with jazz, tap, contemporary. And after my first ballet class, I told my mother I'd like to concentrate on that. And this is age 5, probably.
Yeah. And when you were that young and going into your adolescence, did you ever face any of the stereotyping or issues related to like gender roles in dance?
Not really. Well, because probably until age 9 or 10, I didn't really tell any of my friends at school that I was dancing, not out of embarrassment or fear. It was just I've always just been someone who just sort of goes into my, work environment, whether that when I was a kid, that was school or ballet. I just sort of come, do my thing, and, go home, spend time with my family. Even where I work nowadays, I'm sort of notorious just for coming in, doing my thing and leaving.
I actually, I don't know anybody else who works in the ballet, except yesterday I met one of your colleagues, totally random, at an event. She's a Canadian dancer. Her name's Erica Horwood.
Oh, yes.
And I was like begging her to tell me anything quirky about you, or anything ridiculous that might have happened on stage. And she was like, "No, he pretty much keeps to himself, and he's a really nice guy." And I was like, "You got to give me something else."
Yeah, well, that was one of the perks of moving to Amsterdam, was being able to have a life outside of the theater, because where I first worked in Stuttgart, it's a very provincial town in the middle of Germany, and so, it's developed a bunch in the last 10, 15 years, with a new train station being built and accessibility to the city, but there wasn't much to do except be at the theater and, be with your friends. So you're just sort of congregating at the same locations. And, I didn't feel like I had separation from my work. And that's what I've really enjoyed about Amsterdam, is that that is something you can accomplish very easily if you make the time for it. And yeah, sorry.
Was that kind of the problem that you had with going to boarding school? Is that, you know, boarding school means you're never getting away from getting away from it, right?
Definitely.
This was a dance boarding school.
Yeah, this was when I was in Washington, D.C. at the Kirov Academy from age 13 to I had just turned 17.
It's really elite also, right?
Very elite, world-renowned school. It's closed down since, but for its 25, almost 30-year run, it has produced some incredible dancers, teachers, directors. Even now, the roster is pretty stellar. But no, definitely. I think that's what my mother and father recognized, was that I was so deep in the world of ballet, and it's a very particular environment to be in because of what our goal is. Our goal is perfection. So, you know, anything that doesn't fall in line with that, you're trying to acknowledge in others, or you're not trying to, you just do. You acknowledge this in others, you acknowledge it in yourself, and how people deal with that is all very different, whether you try and make light of your insecurities or your strengths, or you try and take a different approach. It just sort of affects the interactions within each other. And to like add something else on top of that, we're all doing something that we love, you know? So this just, in my opinion, inherently creates sort of a juvenile work environment, you know, where maybe it's a harsh word, but it's a particular environment where everyone loves what they're doing, you know. And so I think what my parents recognized was that that was the only thing that I was experiencing at the time. You know, I wasn't experiencing time at home with my family. You know, I was spending maybe a couple weeks a year at home, and most of the time I was just sleeping because I was so exhausted from, you know, having these, you know, 12-hour days and as a kid. And so I think it just by chance, my mom was at a performance where after the curtain had closed, this woman tapped my mother on the shoulder and said, "Oh, that was your son, wasn't it?" And just by chance, that woman's husband was the chief of surgery at a hospital in D.C. And needed a urogynecologist to join his the women's department. And so just by chance, you know, I think it was right around the time that my mom recognized this in me. It was, okay, it's affecting how he's interacting with the outside world. You know, he's, you know, can, you know, socialize in the ballet world. And, you know, I think my parents also didn't agree so much with that environment as a kid, you know, being the only environment that I was a part of.
Is there, you know, when you're in a school like that, is education actually part of it, or is it sort of glossed over?
You know, academics?
Like actual, you know, the actual studies in high school that a teenager would be doing normally at that time.
So all of the above. Well, at a ballet boarding school, academics is not the priority. So my academic classes were from 7:45 in the morning till probably 1 o'clock. And then I was dancing from 2 until 8. And
that's not easy on a kid.
No. And all in one building, you know, and then add so all in a boarding school. And so, you know, also kids being the example for other kids is a particular environment, you know, when the authority figure is not parental. I understand why, you know, people had pushback about, you know, the Harry Potter books being about a boarding school, you know, at the very beginning, because it's when kids are surrounded by other kids. I mean, I think, you know, we all sort of have experience of what that can be like. It's a very intense environment.
Do you ever kind of look back at that and feel sort of like you have kind of lost years from your childhood in a way?
Yes and no, because, you know, I still grew up with like-minded individuals, and, you know, was really able to celebrate that. But I guess at the same time, having a normal elementary, high school, middle school, high school experience Honestly, no, it's not something I've really ever thought about
No.
missing out on. No, no, no,
Did
no.
you, yeah, people who are teenagers and in high school are starting with dating, and going through relationships at that time, was that something you missed out on?
No, actually, I mean, the people do not stray away from relationships in the ballet world. Definitely not. It's the world of art. It's the world of expression, and it's a very physical environment. So, going through your adolescence in this sort of environment is, yeah,
Yeah.
particular. Yeah, I would say it's probably more extreme than the average middle school, high school experience because of how physical and athletic,
Hmm.
everyone is, and just the amount of energy that's exerted and the different ways that kids of that age let out that energy. Just because we're dancing 6 hours a day doesn't mean that we still don't have energy to just sort of, yeah, burst out when like normal teenagers would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then after your training at this academy, then where do you go from there?
Had just turned 17, and I still had 2 years of professional training to complete. But my teacher that I had currently at that time had left the school, had left the Kirov Academy, and for some particular reasons. And he had mentioned to me that there was a teacher in Stuttgart in Germany at the John Cranko School, Peter Pestoff, and he told me that if he couldn't be my teacher, then this was the one person that he would trust. And so just by chance, I had met some people at a summer intensive that had connections to this school, and I set up an audition and went to the school in September of 2010. And that's where I completed my training. So from 17, 18 until I turned 19 that summer.
Yeah. And then at that point, is there any point where you're 19 and you're turning professional? Is there any point where you're starting to think, is this really what I want to do? Do I really want to keep in this world? I mean, oftentimes when kids turn 17, 18, they're starting to look at the choices that they've made up to that point. They're starting to look at the choices going forward, especially in the US after that first year of university. Kids are looking at, do I want to stay with this study? Do I want to stay at this college or university? Do I want to go and do something completely different? Others might jump on a gap year. Did you ever, have any of that?
No, I've never questioned any of this.
No,
never.
Is that kind of what puts you on a path to being able to do this professionally? Is that it's so crystal clear for you personally that this is what you wanted to be doing?
Yeah, I think no matter at what point, whether it's during a professional training or during a professional career, if someone comes to the realization that this isn't for them anymore, that happens in many different ways. But I feel like what sort of separates the people that experience this and the people that don't are the ones that really just never beg the question. And I've been really lucky for up until a certain point that I was never begging the question. And that's through my childhood, through my adolescence, through the first few years of my professional career, and then a lot of different kinds of realities sort of start to sink in. And then as an adult, you ask these questions, but it's not as, it doesn't feel as extreme as when you would be asking them when you're of an age of maybe 17, 18, or 19.
Right.
It feels more just like logistics.
And then, so you ended up spending about 8 years in Germany, and then and then you came over here in Amsterdam, and you've been here for about 7 years.
Yes.
So during the time that you worked professionally, or at sort of towards the end of your training, did you ever have any serious injuries that you had to grapple with?
I've had 2 knee surgeries. Coincidentally, I've torn my meniscus in both of my knees, and they happened around 6 years apart. And one was when I was 18, right in my graduating year of school. And I took a couple weeks off, or a couple months off, and came back into training. And And then the other one was when I was working here professionally in my first season. And this one went by much faster because I had a understanding of what had happened. So I had a much different approach to rehab. But I've been very lucky, nothing catastrophic. I've had some moments where I've needed to take some time off, but it's all been preventative.
Mm-hmm. And, when you had this knee surgery, after just showing up in Amsterdam, what was the National Ballet's reaction to that? They must have felt sort of like,
No, they were,
maybe just a bad circumstance or bad luck.
they were so understanding of it. I mean, it's not a conversation that's had all the time, but I guess it's kind of niche. But I've witnessed a few times. A new dancer enters a company, and it's just sort of being in a new environment. There's we're always trying to be hyper aware of things, but it's when you're sort of in limbo, finding your space somewhere. I've seen quite a few times a new dancer get injured their first season, and it's or you'll hear of a friend that moved to a new company and they got injured, their first year. It's sort of, I feel like it's one of those energy things that hasn't been spoken about. We're kind of prone to something happening.
Because we were talking about, that sort of striving for perfection that is so prevalent in ballet in general. There's also a stereotype about ballet of pushing through injuries and trying to ignore, signs that your body is giving you.
Yeah, thankfully that is not the case in most companies today. I mean, or at least that's something that they're really trying to have a conversation about, because yes, the ballet world is notorious for, just biting your tongue and pushing through the pain. And because of the time sensitivity of our career, and when you have an opportunity, you take it, because when you're not dancing, when you're not in sight, then out of sight, out of mind. And so that's something that's always weighing on each individual dancer. So how they choose to handle that is, of course, on their own. But we're definitely encouraged more and more to listen to our bodies and, to what it's telling us, to, search for a deeper understanding of, what aches and pains mean, and scientifically, and also just for, treating the patient as well, having a general understanding, but also the understanding of, how everyone's different in terms of their bodies and their capabilities. So we're really lucky at the Dutch National Ballet. Laura, the head of our health department, she's fantastic. She's taken an already great program and just has taken it even further. We have we're involved with a sports doctor here that is regularly coming to the theater to help out, and just in terms of our physio, our Pilates, our conditioning trainer, we've got the works. So conversation is definitely broadened. Yeah.
That's physical health, though, and and what about mental health? Is that something that's also...
Well, mental health is always something that could be explored more. Yeah, and unfortunately, at the moment, it's not in many places, not just at Dutch National. I mean, of course, we're trying to have conversations around it, but in terms of taking care of individuals' mental well-being, it's more something that people need to seek on their own.
Several different cultural institutions in the Netherlands recently. Yours is, as far as I recall, not among them. So I'm not trying to call out the National Ballet or anything.
No problem.
But several cultural institutions in the Netherlands have recently been under more scrutiny and more criticism for, let's say, a lack of awareness of workplace behavior, an unwillingness to tackle, let's say, bullying or harassing behavior by people who are in more senior positions, particularly towards performers, also towards athletes as well. Is that something that is still the case, generally speaking, in the ballet world, or is that something that, is starting to be addressed broadly?
It's definitely starting to be addressed. I mean, the thought that comes to mind is that, maybe Dutch National Opera and Ballet isn't, officially on this list, but what makes me, the thought that comes to mind is the conversations that we do have. It's we've had intimate coordinators come, intimacy coordinators come, and we've had a lot of attention, put on these certain topics. Of course, it's a difficult conversation to have because there is sort of a tradition and a status quo that has, let certain behaviors be let certain behaviors be accepted. And I feel like that's any work environment where time is of the essence. There's a great interview of Rita Hayworth where she speaks about her opinion on why Hollywood divas are allowed to act in a certain way and nobody confronts the situation because it just takes more time away from the curtain going up. So there is, but that's being acknowledged more and more, through different hierarchical relationships and, whether there's things that need to be spoken about. And so it's interesting to hear, there's a list of people, and I would be very interested to see how that is being translated into their daily working environment, or if it is just being on a list, because I know at Dutch National we're very much having that conversation, and it's a nice working environment. We don't have, unfortunately, for maybe the viewers and people's impression of our world, it's not as dramatic as
No, but also it's it's a subject that at least here in the Netherlands keeps coming up again and again, because it also comes up repeatedly in the sports world. It's come up in the gymnastics world here, which was reported about widely. It's come up in the elite football schools, so the soccer schools here, particularly the ones associated with professional teams.
Okay.
And whether or not they care for the well-being, especially of their up and coming and rising talents. A lot of them sometimes take the attitude of, well, if you don't like it, you can leave, and we have 9 other people who can fill your place at the age of 16 or 15. Was that something that you've ever encountered, or that you hear about in the ballet world as well, particularly having gone to a boarding school too?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that's sort of a known fact for us anyhow in the dance world, because, you have a premiere cast, you have the first cast, then you have a second, third, fourth, fifth, sometimes sixth, seventh, eighth cast, and so there's there's moments, where I've been first cast and I've had the thought like, oh, if I'm sick, or if, there's something that leads me to make a decision to not be a part of this particular production, there's 7 or 8 people behind me, so there is, but it's not presented in a way where it's coming from any particular uncomfortable situation. It's just sort of how our world is, so it's it's troubling to hear that there are so many organizations, still having this these troubles. And of course, the art world in general hasn't, fixed, everything. And there's still a lot of conversations to be had at Dutch National and at theaters all over the world. But in terms of, sorry, I'm getting a bit lost. In terms of seeing action being taken every day, I feel quite comfortable in the work environment that I'm in.
Yeah. The other issue that sometimes comes up with classic arts, especially, is keeping shows relevant, and keeping them relevant also for younger audiences, new social norms, or changing attitudes. How is that something that's undertaken where you work, and how do you take a role in that?
Well, our role as dancers are to be canvases for whatever choreographer or dramaturgist comes, to participate fully. I guess that's our part to play in it. But it's interesting because there are a lot of avenues being taken to stay relevant if, with certain conversations, and it's interesting to see which ones are successful and which ones aren't.
Mhm.
And it's not quite clear what differentiates the two. But I have some theories, where there are so many
Bring
conversations.
them. Bring them.
Well, there are just so many conversations to be had, and it's not like this. It's not like the 2020s or the 2010s or the first decades of people to explore certain topics. I mean, if you really dig into art, whether it's dance, music, theater, there have been intense conversations being had, since the 50s, 60s, 70s, in terms of underground art performance, a lot of things. And even mainstream, productions of the West End, there are a lot of tough conversations being had, and the ones that have become classics and the ones that have thrived and, still resonate today, they're speaking about almost the exact same thing as other productions of the same medium were, but why is one more successful than the other? And for me, it just sort of comes down to the intention of, you're trying to tell a story in a new way, whether it's breaking certain norms or, trying to have a deeper conversation about a certain topic. Most of it's all been done before, and so it's just, I think it comes down to the individual whose vision it is to really look at their intention. Why do they want to break boundaries by telling the story? Is it just to break boundaries, or is it to really dive deep into what the story could represent to so many people that they haven't, and they never had this thought before? It's because I've experienced a few times where the sole purpose of breaking boundaries doesn't always work out, and it's in my view, it's almost detrimental to our art form, because it's sort of, it begs the question, well, then why is there a need to try and be relevant when we try and it's not successful? And so, but luckily here at Dutch National, it's not so much the case. It's the Netherlands in general is very forward thinking, has sort of been the sort of holding the hand of a lot of countries in terms of being an example of acceptance and having conversations around everything that falls underneath that umbrella.
The ballet company that you're part of, it's also quite a bit different from other ballet companies. This is a conversation I got into with your colleague as well.
Oh, yeah.
In that your ballet company is, really made up of people from, many different countries and many different backgrounds. And, if you look at other especially national companies, they tend to be mostly, people who, were grown up and raised in the system in those countries.
Oh, yeah. The Netherlands walks the walk and talks the talk, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we're 34 different nationalities in the company. And it's really wonderful. Yeah. But that's also the language of dance. It's universal, So, I mean, there are different schoolings of ballet, whether you grew up in Italy and studied the Cecchetti style, or your school was based in Vaganova method from Russia, or you were trained from the French school, it's all still the same language. And no, we're really lucky with the Dutch National Ballet, but it also really represents Amsterdam. It represents the Netherlands, and so I don't really see it any other way.
Yeah, because it would almost be odd for it to be in a different way, right? Out of place almost.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's also been a strength of the Dutch in general, in terms of how they appreciate art. Of course they celebrate their own, like any other country would, but they also really tend to celebrate people that just excite them, and they're very in my view, they're very good at appreciating art.
We've interviewed a number of comedians, especially
Uh-huh.
who have remarked about how Dutch audiences or Amsterdam audiences can sometimes be more subdued, or let's say maybe stingy with giving up their laughs or their appreciation. Do you ever feel the same way in ballet? That what's your
Um,
opinion on the Dutch audiences?
um, I don't know if it's them being like subdued. I think it's more them just really um, observing and taking in what they're experiencing. I mean, yeah, well, I guess sometimes maybe that comes down to the ego of the performer, because I mean, I can imagine with being a comedian, it's much more difficult because you're receiving confirmation, every 5 to 10 seconds, depending on your type of comedy. And but there have been moments here where we'll have a general rehearsal with all the students from the academy and all the workers in the theater and season ticket holders, and that evening will be wild. It'll be like we're at AFAS Live Center, and then we'll have the premiere evening where it's all of the guests that fall in line with that sort of evening, and it comes across as subdued, but I think they're really just taking in what they're experiencing, because I'd say like 95% of the time they're stood up at the end of the show, and where I worked in Stuttgart before, I mean, I think I saw one standing ovation in the 5 years that I was working there professionally. And it was, for someone retiring after having been there for 20 years, so maybe one other besides that, but it was, you don't even know what was in the air that evening. There was just something there that, brought the people to their feet. And here, I'd say most of the time, they show their appreciation at the end.
Whether it was here or whether you were on tour or at a different company, what was kind of, I don't want to say worst, but what was the, most unusual reaction or responses that you've gotten from an audience?
China.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. They clap for a very short amount of time at the end, and that's it. It's maybe, I'd say the average curtain calls for a performance are maybe, 5 minutes here in Amsterdam and max, and in China it was about a minute.
We talked to a Dutch actor named Minicola, who has been in a number of TV series and is now on stage at the International Theater in Amsterdam. No. And he had just gotten back from doing a performance in China, and instead of them applauding at the end of the show, they all had their smartphones out and were shooting video.
Maybe that's why it's only
of everybody and everybody in the crowd's reaction. So nobody was applauding because everybody only had one hand free because they were all shooting video at that moment.
Oh wow, that's funny. Maybe that's why it only feels like a minute. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that could be.
Are you sort of lucky in a way that you've gotten to spend so many years in one place and a lot of years in another place, as opposed to moving around every 2 to 3 years? Is that something that's common in your world, like it is in with stage performers or your colleagues on the opera side, and sometimes move around a little bit more frequently?
It's becoming more common for dancers, for artists to want to explore different work environments. I'd say for me, it was more fortunate that I had the opportunity. I became a principal dancer with the Stuttgart Ballet quite quickly, and it sort of took me by surprise. And after I had a few seasons as a principal dancer under my belt, I sort of understood that I was lucky. I had the opportunity that if I wanted to, I could join another ballet theater as a principal dancer, and learn what their repertoire was about and their understanding of the ballet world's tradition, but also their personal tradition as a theater. And I feel lucky that sort of it's helped me understand that. I mean, we're all sort of living in the same world, and a lot of factors that people would expect aren't so much the factors. It's more, what country you're living in, or the people, the people that you're surrounded by, and these are the things that sort of change where you are, because the ballet world's the ballet world. It's pretty much the same everywhere.
Between the time that you spend in rehearsal, the time that you spend on training, the time that you spend performing, touring, does that have an impact on your personal relationships?
It has, yeah, for sure. I mean, I've had some girlfriends in the past that weren't dancers, and the only side that they saw of things were the premiere parties, the moments in the foyer, the very the spectacularness that is going to the theater and experiencing that. And but then they haven't been able to understand the everyday routine that is required, and so it's affected, and even with friends, just, I guess in all types of relationships, just because, people want to, go out on a Friday night and I've got a show Saturday, it's, there's priorities, so it's always interesting when I meet new people to see them process that. And, but no, it's not, it hasn't affected my relationships in a negative way. It's just sort of it's helped me understand people's willingness to understand you and what you're doing.
Are you in a relationship with anybody now?
No,
not
at the moment.
How's that going?
It's all right. It's all right. I mean, a lot of self-discovery at the moment, more than ever before. But yeah, it's been okay.
Is it kind of hard, after you've done a performance in Amsterdam, coming back home, and it's you with your thoughts?
This thought used to be quite depressing for me, because when I was with Stuttgart Ballet, and I was promoted to principal when I was 20, and 20, 21, 22. These were years I was getting a lot of roles underneath my belt, and dancing so much. And I remember there being a couple months that had gone by, and I had a few premieres, debuts in certain roles. And I remember very clearly, I opened up the door to my apartment, and my thought was just, what did any of that just mean when I'm thinking about the things that I'm experiencing as a human every day, whether it was some very young, tumultuous relationship at the time, or, everyday things. It was a thought that I sort of grappled with, like, okay, I'm giving escapism to a group of people, but, because it's such a tough career, and it's we don't have as many outer body experiences as people would think, because of how physically demanding our job is, that sometimes you do have to sort of have these thoughts where it's like, okay, you have to clarify what it means for you and how that is separate from your everyday life.
And what does that mean for you now? This is 10 years later now, right, from what you're talking about. So what's changed in that time?
I think what's changed is that I have a better understanding of what has been given to me in this life. The abilities that I have. Being able to dance and be fit and healthy, and on top of that, being able to tell stories and have it be my job, and give people this sense of escapism and enjoyment in life, and just to be a part of that is really nice. And it's also, I guess, something that I try and focus on. It's the thought that I add to what I was saying previously earlier in the episode, that with nerves and everything that comes along with performing, relying on this is muscle memory, you've been doing it as a kid, you know what you're doing, and then to add on top of that what it brings to other people. I think, because it is sort of a depressing thought sometimes when you're on stage, acting out this great love scene, and you're thinking about what you want for dinner, and so the disconnect has sort of been something that I see more as a positive, that's okay, that's how I'm processing it, but what it gives to other people is really great.
When you develop personal relationships, whether they're romantic or just new friendships.
Yeah.
You know, are you at a point in your life where you're looking for this outside of the dance world?
Well, that's been in my personality for many years. I had one girlfriend in in the first company that I worked in, and it was very appropriate for that time.
Mm-hmm.
We were both being promoted and going up the ranks quite quickly, and it was more of a relationship of support, and for that time. And after that experience, I just sort of naturally gravitated to wanting to hear about someone's day that I hadn't already witnessed.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing for me. Interpersonal work relationships. That's after my first experience. It's never been really what I've searched for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoy coming home and hearing about your day.
Mm.
Yeah. And all I really grew up with was, dance and a few hours of academics a day. It's and I'm very curious about, politics, about, different forms of art, a lot of things. So it's always nice to experience that.
Mm.
Yeah, and you can bring it to your art, hopefully, as well.
Yeah. Are you starting to think about life after dancing?
Oh, totally, completely. Yeah.
What is life after dancing?
Hopefully be a Renaissance man. It would be nice to do a few things. I mean, it's kind of what I want to take advantage of because the career of a dancer is so short that I'm coming to terms with when I would like to retire. I'm turning 32 in July, and so it's coming up. It's around the corner before I know it. But I'm interested in a few things. I would be interested in coaching and staying within the world in some respect, but I also really enjoy writing. I work for a restaurant here in Amsterdam, Q, on Utrechtstraat. You guys should check it out. And I'm part of the marketing team, so I write. I'm the copyright for the restaurant.
Just for fun?
I get paid. It's a side hustle.
But I mean, more like, do you do it for fun for yourself, or do you do it because?
Oh, well, the love for writing started off
Yeah.
because I enjoy it. I'm interested in screenplay writing, and it's always been something that I've sort of dabbled with on my own, but I've never shared to anyone. And through my buddies at the restaurant, the chefs, and the opportunities sort of came about where we thought it would be a funny idea if I was the copyright for the restaurant. And so I enjoy doing that, and it's just sort of my first avenue into exploring that interest. And one of my best friends is a sous chef at a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Zwolle at Libraia.
De Libraia?
Yeah, De Libraia. Yeah, the infamous Libraia. And so through him, I've also been really found a love for hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would love to work front of house at a nice fine dining restaurant, maybe. I mean, there's a few things. There's other things I'd like to explore, but I have no concrete,
we were talking about Amsterdam and how much you enjoy the city, and that you're doing some work in hospitality. What is nightlife for you and your colleagues? I mean, assuming that it's a day that you don't, a night that you don't have a performance the next day. What are you all doing? And when you're going out, are you going out dancing? Are the ballet dancers also going out dancing at night?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, going to a club with a group of ballet dancers is a particularly fun experience. I mean, just because of just their dancing capabilities. I mean, and to see people breaking away from the strict confinement that is classical ballet and just getting groovy like most people would, but it's heightened because of their capabilities. Yeah. So it's go clubbing quite often, but it's I have been in situations where I've had some friends or some colleagues that have been like, that would say to the bouncer, please let us in, we'll dance, like we'll get the party, like we'll keep it going, and it's worked definitely.
Yeah,
it's a good group to go out with. Yeah.
Do they push it too far, the ballet dancers, or are they out of the bar, well before closing time?
That's to each his own, I guess. I mean, there's something about being an athlete that sort of gives you this sense of, I can get away with certain things. I'm a high performance athlete. I'm healthy. I'm fit. So, I mean, but nothing that is dangerous.
That's when the tray of shots comes around.
Oh, completely. But I tend to, alcohol is not so much my thing. I've been lucky in that regard that I enjoy a cocktail maybe for the craftsmanship of it, but I've never been interested in getting drunk.
It's interesting that you're talking about, in your work as a performer as being, providing other people with entertainment or escapism, which is also very much what the hospitality world is. It's, providing other people with an experience of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
It's also very much what writing is and screenplay writing is, providing people a form of escape and entertainment. I mean, is this kind of just, what is it about you that's, that you want to give all of this to other people?
Wow, I feel like I've portrayed maybe a false image of myself. Well, because in my personal life, I make a lot of things about myself, but I'm not sure what it is. I mean, I know that at least for dance, it's been difficult to sort of accept my own successes because I was promoted to principal when I was quite young, and it's when you're in an environment where mostly everyone's striving for the same goals, and you've reached a certain goal, how you try and present your understanding of what's happening to you can vary from person to person. You see people living in the moment, and then you see how what I thought was, trying to downplay certain things and, be like, oh, this is great, but I'm so exhausted, and just trying to feel like you're still salt of the earth with everything that's around you. And maybe that's a weird way to describe it, but, and so I think part of, taking that pressure off and that responsibility, because, naturally I'm lucky. I show up, I work hard, and all these things, but I think it's sort of taken the pressure off of things, just been like, oh, this is a beautiful art form for others. This is because if I focus too much on what it's bringing to me right now in the moment, it's a lot of aches and pains.
Yeah.
A lot of things that, a 31-year-old should not be waking up to, like, completely groaning, getting out of bed, and just the level of exhaustion is something to deal with. And so trying not to let that affect things.
Do you think that you're going to stay in the Netherlands?
I'm not sure. I'm really curious about moving back to the States at some point because I've been away since 2010. And of course, I visit home maybe once, or sometimes, if I'm lucky, 2 or 3 times a year because of performances in New York City or elsewhere. But I would really like to be closer to my family at some point, where they can be a part of my everyday routine. It's, that's something I hope for.
Okay. And I think my last question, and we just had no idea how to approach this to begin with. Is it time that we come up with a new word for a male ballet dancer than ballerino?
Yeah, I mean, well, the terminology, I guess, would be like premier dancer. Like that's what we're taught, like when we're, but I guess in terms of like the everyday, Yeah, the most common term, ballerino. Yeah, I'm sure we could come up with a better one, but I do not want that pressure.
Right. Okay. All right, Costa, at least for the time that you're here in the Netherlands, I hope people go and check you out on stage over there and check you out on tour. How can they find you if they're looking to see where you're performing?
Yeah, I mean, the cast list for our performances at the Dutch National Ballet are posted a few months before each program. And if you want to see where I'm performing over the summer, check out my Instagram page.
Which is?
Constantine Allen.
Constantine Allen.
Yep.
All right. Well, Costa, thank you again for your time. It's been really great chatting with you.
It's been nice. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Damn Yankee is produced in partnership with NL Times, the top choice for English language news from the Netherlands. Founded nearly 15 years ago, NL Times grew to become the #1 site for information about this country, featuring more news stories every day of the week than any other website. Keep tabs on the latest top stories and breaking news from across the entire country, not only in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague. Find out more at nltimes.nl. Damn Yankee is an NL Times podcast. The show was created by me and Pete Rizzo. Pete Rizzo produced this episode, and Marcus Engel edited the episode.